This is the World Organic News for the week ending 3rd of September 2018. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. This week we begin with 2 posts from the blog The Cornucopia Allotment, Saving Seeds and Allotment Ecology. At this time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere, as vegetables come to the end of their growing phase, the idea of saving seeds sticks its head above the parapet. The advantages of saving seeds are many. The cost savings alone would suggest this is a good idea. The other advantages are more subtle. Each season we grow and then regrow from saved seeds, we are putting a selective pressure on the genome of the seeds we save. Which ones we save is the important first step. Larger lettuce, taller kale, more productive pumpkins and so on can be selected for. The more often we do this, that is, year after year with the same saved seeds, we are heading towards micro-adapted populations of plants. To do this, we need to use open-pollinated, non-hybrid seeds to start with. If we use hybrid seeds, 2 things can happen. 1, we only get one sex of flowers in the next generation. Let me explain. A friend saved some Halloween pumpkin seeds which I planted for her. All the flowers on the vines from those seeds were male, therefore no fruit. These seeds have been bred to ensure this so that the growers would have to return to the seed company every year. The other thing with hybrid seeds is their offspring return to their original types used in the hybridization process. These may be useful, but usually they are not. Open-pollinated saved seeds throw true to type. The post cited, saving seeds, may well run up against either of these side effects of hybridization. The post, though, does give some good info on saving rockmelon seeds. That's cantaloupe to our listeners in North America. Quote, "The taste was delicious, so collecting the seed in a small glass container, I added warm water and stored overnight. Once the seeds were clean, without the syrupy residue from the melon, I laid them out on a piece of kitchen roll to dry." End quote. The seeds were then planted out and some were saved. The process is relatively straightforward. Give it a go and start adding selection pressures favouring your local microclimate. The second post, Allotment Ecology, goes into the need and the ways to recycle biological material, in this case mostly botanical waste, in air quotes, are the focus of the post. Quote, "The reality about allotments is there is a lot of green waste to sift through. Every time I set foot on the place, I can collect 60-litre bags of weeds. On our first digs, we were aware that our next step was to be composting. Taking the top layer of grass meant a lot of material. It cannot be called waste, as potentially it is next year's topsoil." End quote. All that being said, the post does go into some detail on how to recycle botanical materials through the mini ecosystem of an allotment garden. There is much to recommend in this, and I would urge you to read the post in full, link in the show notes. Our next post, and I apologise for any mangling of language that's going on here, which I believe is Thai. Our next post from Sai Behind Food at Banthong Lang Lay takes these recycling of nutrients a step further. It is entitled Carbon Capturing Perennials in Tropical Lowland Food Forest, Chao Phraya River Basin. Again, I apologise for any mispronunciations. This post covers the effect of price signals, weather events, long-term effects on soil and carbon capture. It is a remarkable story. In the district referred to, it goes from growing fruit trees, mostly citrus, and timber, mostly eucalypts, to a return to paddy rice with 3 crops a year, and a final return to a regenerative combination of tree crops. The catalysts for these changes were all weather or funding related. A cyclone devastated the citrus trees, government incentives to grow rice, and finally a change in those incentives brought people back to regenerative farming. Moving from the paddy rice to the perennials started with bananas. These were used as the pioneer species. And then between the rows of established bananas, hemp was grown as a green manure and turned back into the soil. Coconut trees were planted in the shade of the bananas and these did well. Surrounding the fields of bananas and coconut are the surviving eucalypts planted as an industrial crop and windbreak around the original citrus trees. The perennial nature of this local agro-ecosystem has stabilising effects upon the landscape. The coconuts and eucalypts survive the annual flooding, as do the bananas. They are also fairly resistant to cyclones. If not immune, they are easily replanted, as are the bananas. From citrus to rice, the stability. An interesting story, and again I would recommend a full reading of the post, there's a link in the show notes. Now from the blog of Bounty and Bedlam comes the post, Step Away from the Landscape Fabric. I concur with the title before even opening the post. Weed matting, landscape fabric, whatever you call it, is a shortcut to disaster. Quote, every gardener is tempted. Weeds are our primary nemesis in the battle of beautifying our yards. Not only are weeds unsightly, but they strangle and crowd out more desirable plants. Some even serve as vectors for disease or pests. Who wouldn't be tempted by the promise of, relatively, weed-free living? For just a few bucks, all your weedy worries could vanish under a black sheet of porous plastic, end quote. This sounds remarkably like a sales pitch from a herbicide company, and the effects are not dissimilar. In the first year, things look okay, but from there on, it's a downhill slide. Quote, every year I put down a fresh layer of mulch, and every year I still have to pull weeds out of the beds. And what's worse is that pieces of landscape fabric start popping up all over, especially at the edges, no matter how heavily or tight I think I have the edgings placed. Squirrels and chipmunks dig things up, erosion happens, plants push away the unnatural covering to reach the light. You thought the weeds were unsightly? Try bits of black plastic fabric that looks like garbage, end quote. The post goes on to point out that the matting/fabric also stops the natural flow of organic matter. The decomposing mulch on top is unable to be incorporated into the soil. After all, there's a layer of plastic in the way. Anything oil-based offered as a shortcut to horticulture or agriculture should be viewed with suspicion. Do not be an early adopter in this field of human endeavour would be my advice. And on that somewhat bossy note, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. As a podcast listener, you may be thinking of producing your own podcast, but you're not sure where to begin. Drop over to mrjohnmoore.com and pick up the free checklists I've written to help get you started. I'm also doing live presentations over on YouTube and putting these up as podcasts under the show name Pod Thoughts to help you through the process, link in the show notes, and full details at the website mrjohnmoore.com. A transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.